The moment the first human ship rammed my supply freighter, I knew something had gone wrong with my calculations. I am Commander Vrenth Kalzer of the Concordant Hegemony, and I have conquered 47 worlds in my career. I have never seen a species do what the humans did in the first hour of the war. They did not run, they did not beg, they did not send diplomats with trembling hands. They attacked. My flagship, the Eternal Sovereign, hung above the blue world they call Earth. Below us, 3 of their military bases had been turned to dust. Their elected leader was gone. Their main orbital platform was floating wreckage. By every rule the hegemony had learned across 3,000 years of conquest, these humans should have been sending surrender signals within the hour. Instead, my sensor officer turned to me with a pale face and said, "Commander, a civilian cargo vessel has just rammed. The glorious dawn is gone." I stared at him. Gone. Destroyed, sir. The human ship was carrying refined fuel. They flew it into our engines. I felt my crest stiffen. This was not in the reports. My xenopsychology team had studied humans for 2 full years. They had given me a thick document full of predictions. Humans were emotional. They said humans were divided. Humans would break quickly once their leaders were removed. I had read every page. I had trusted every word. Now a civilian freighter had just destroyed one of my warships, and the pilot was a 60-year-old cargo captain named Walter Briggs, who left a recorded message for his daughter before he flew into my engines. "Play the message," I said. The screen flickered. An old human appeared sitting in the cockpit of his small ship. His face was calm. His eyes were steady. He spoke with the kind of voice that had seen many storms and feared none of them. "Katie, honey, if you're watching this, then it worked. I love you. Tell your mother I'm sorry I couldn't come home for dinner. These folks came to our world and thought we just lie down. I had to show them we don't." The message ended. My bridge was silent. I told myself this was one man, one foolish old man with a ship. My fleet had glassed his cities. My weapons had broken his armies. He was a last gasp of defiance before the inevitable surrender. This was not a pattern. This was noise. Then the second ship hit us. Then the third. By the end of the first day, I had lost 4 vessels to civilian ships flown by people who should have been hiding in shelters. A grandmother named Helen Carter flew a mining shuttle into my fuel depot. A school teacher named Peter Brooks guided a passenger ferry into my communications array. A young woman named Grace Miller, who had been a nurse only a week before, flew a medical transport directly into the bridge of my sister vessel. Each of them left a message. Each message was calm. Each message was polite. Each message ended with the same kind of quiet certainty: "We do not surrender." I sat in my private chamber that night and read through the xenopsychology reports again. The words looked different now. The predictions felt like stories told by children who had never seen a real war. The authors had studied humans through their broadcasts, their television shows, their arguments on their global network. They had concluded that humans were soft, comfortable, distracted by small pleasures. They had missed something. I did not yet know what. My second-in-command, Sub-Commander Elise Threnv, entered the chamber with her head low. She was a younger officer One of my best, and she had never looked uncertain before. Tonight she did. Commander, she said, we have a transmission from the surface. Not from a government, from someone calling themselves the Joint Command. The Joint Command. They have organized, sir, the different human nations. They have put aside their disagreements and formed one military command in less than a day. I processed this slowly. 47 species. I had conquered 47 species. Not one of them had unified in response to my attack. Some had tried, most had used the attack as an excuse to pursue old grudges against their neighbors. Civil war had been my greatest weapon on 19 of those 47 worlds. The humans had apparently skipped that step entirely. Put it through, I said. The screen activated and a woman appeared. She wore a dust-covered uniform. She was standing in what looked like an underground bunker. There were maps behind her. There were officers moving with purpose. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry either, which disturbed me more. She looked focused. This is Admiral Linda Parker speaking. On behalf of the Unified Human Defense Command, she said. Her voice was level. Her eyes looked directly into the camera, as if she could see me through it. You came to our world. You destroyed our cities. You killed our president. You expected us to surrender. She paused. We are not going to surrender. I leaned forward. I was about to reply. I was ready to explain the arithmetic of the situation. My fleet outnumbered her entire planetary military by a factor of 100. Her weapons could not touch my shields. Her ships could not catch my ships. By every rational measurement, she had lost this war before it began. She did not give me the chance to speak. I know what you're going to say, she continued. You are going to tell me that we cannot win. You are going to tell me about your numbers and your technology. You are going to offer us terms that seem generous compared to what you could do to us. I am not interested in your math. Her voice grew quieter. It did not grow softer. You have made a mistake today that you do not yet understand. You thought we were 47 other species. We are not. You came here expecting to find a world that would break. You will find a world that does not know how. She leaned closer to the camera. You should have made us afraid. Instead, you made us angry. By the time you learn the difference, it will be too late for your people. The screen went dark. I sat in the silence for a long time. Elise was watching me. She did not speak. She knew me well enough to let me think. Finally, I said, she is bluffing. Yes, Commander. She has to be bluffing. No species speaks that way to a superior enemy. It is the behavior of a cornered animal. It has no strategic value. Yes, Commander. Send the standard response. Offer generous terms. Tell them we respect their courage. Tell them that further resistance will cost them greatly. Give them 12 hours to reply. Yes, Commander. She left. I sat alone in my chamber. I looked at the reports on my desk. I looked at the messages from the civilian pilots who had flown their small ships into my warships. I looked at the image of Admiral Linda Parker, the woman with the steady eyes. Something was wrong. I could not name it yet, but something in my chest, some deep instinct older than my training, was telling me that I had stepped into a situation I did not understand. I pushed the feeling aside. I was Commander Vrin, that's called Zor. I had 47 worlds behind me. Humans were a primitive species with old chemical rockets and no unified history of space warfare. They would break. They would all break eventually. They just needed a stronger push. I gave the order for the second wave of strikes, more cities, more bases, more of their leadership. I went asleep believing the surrender would come within 3 days. I woke up 7 hours later to an emergency alarm. Elise was on the intercom and her voice was not steady. "Commander, you need to come to the bridge." "What has happened?" "It would be better if you saw it yourself." I moved faster than I had in years. I reached the bridge to find my officers staring at the main display. On the screen was a satellite image of a human city, one of their industrial centers. I had ordered it spared during the first strike because it had manufacturing value. I had planned to use its factories once the war ended. The factories were still there. They had changed. In 7 hours, the humans had begun converting every civilian manufacturing site on their planet into a weapons production line. Automobile plants were now building military vehicles, aircraft. Factories were now building fighters. Computer companies were now producing targeting systems. The speed was impossible. The coordination was impossible. The willingness of their civilians to abandon their old lives and work around the clock was impossible. And yet it was happening on every continent, in every country, even in the nations my fleet had not yet touched. My sensor officer turned to me with wide eyes. "Commander, we are also receiving reports of volunteer enlistment numbers. The humans are asking us to confirm our data before we act on it." "Show me." The numbers appeared on my screen. I read them twice. I read them a third time. In one day, 14 million humans had volunteered to fight, not soldiers, not trained military, ordinary citizens, teachers, farmers, office workers, students. They were lining up outside recruitment centers in such numbers that the human command could not process them. All 14 million. In one day. I stared at the number and felt, for the first time in my long career, the small, cold touch of doubt. I pushed it aside. I gave the order for the next strike. I told myself that this was still a war I would win. The humans I would learn were only just beginning. 6 months had passed since the first strike, and I no longer recognized the war I had started. My flagship had been pulled back to the outer edge of the Sol system, hiding in an asteroid belt like a wounded animal. I had lost 2 full fleets. I had lost worlds I had never expected to defend. I was writing this log because I could no longer trust my own memory to keep track of how badly things had gone. The first thing I had gotten wrong was the nature of human persistence. The second thing I had gotten wrong was the nature of human creativity. The third thing, and the one I kept returning to at night, was the nature of human kindness. Let me explain what I mean. In our conquest of the Krelthi worlds, 300 cycles ago, the Krelthi had fought bravely for 11 days. Then their leaders had surrendered because they could not bear to watch their children suffer. Hegemony had praised their wisdom. Krelthi had become a respected servant species. The humans were not like this. The humans loved their children too. I had seen it in their recordings. I had watched human parents carry their children out of burning cities. I had watched human soldiers weep over the bodies of their friends. They were not a cold species, they were not without feeling. In fact, they seemed to feel more than most species I had studied. And yet when we attacked their civilians, they did not surrender to protect them. They fought harder, they built weapons faster, they volunteered in greater numbers. When I attempted to force their surrender by striking population centers, the result was always the same. The next day my fleet would be attacked by twice as many ships crewed by people whose families had been in those centers. It was as if their love for their children made them more dangerous, not less. I did not understand this. I still do not fully understand it. The second problem was their adaptation speed. Our technology was 500 cycles ahead of theirs when the war began. I had expected this advantage to last the entire conflict. Instead, the humans began reverse engineering everything. They captured, within 3 months they had produced shield generators that matched ours. Within 4 months their new warships were faster than our older models. Within 5 months they had designed a weapon we had never seen before. It was a rail-based kinetic launcher that fired dense projectiles at speeds that made our shields nearly useless. They had also begun to understand our ships better than we did. A captured human engineer, a woman named Hannah Price, had been brought aboard my ship during the 3rd month. I had her questioned extensively. She refused to speak about military matters, but she did say one thing I could not forget. She said, "Your ships are beautiful. They are also full of compromises. You have stopped noticing. You have been flying the same basic design for so long that you no longer see what is wrong with it. We do. We see all of it." She was returned to her people in a prisoner exchange 2 weeks later. Within a month, the human fleet began exploiting exactly those weaknesses. The third problem was the one that truly shook me. On the small colony world of New Geneva, a human defense force had been overrun. Their commander, a man named Arthur Bellamy, had been forced to surrender. His remaining soldiers, I had accepted the surrender personally through remote transmission. It was the first human surrender of the war. I had felt, for one foolish moment, that perhaps we had reached the breaking point at last. I had allowed my occupation force to land. I had given my standard orders for pacification. It was the same procedure we had used on 47 worlds. 3 days later, every member of my occupation force was gone. Not killed, not exactly something stranger. The humans had not fought them in the open. The humans had not bombed their positions. The humans had simply quietly taken them. Soldiers vanished from their bunks. Officers disappeared from their private quarters. Sentries were replaced by stuffed uniforms propped up in their positions so that the change was not noticed for hours. The commander of the occupation force himself, Colonel Thuron Wall, was taken from his command tent, while 6 guards stood outside. And then one morning, every single captured soldier of mine was returned. All of them alive, healthy, with a message written on each of their chest plates in clear hegemony script. "We are not like you. Do not confuse that. For weakness, leave this world." Colonel Thuron refused to speak of what had happened during his captivity. He asked to be reassigned to a rear post. He asked for psychological treatment. He never commanded in the field again. I evacuated New Geneva within the week. I could not explain the decision in my formal reports. I wrote that it was a tactical redeployment. It was not. It was the first time in my career that I had retreated from a world I had already conquered, because the conquered people had politely but firmly made it clear that I was not welcome. The humans had not terrified me with savagery. They had done something worse. They had shown me that they could have done anything they wished to my soldiers, and they had chosen not to. The restraint was the message. The restraint was the threat. It said, we are better than you. We will win this war anyway. I returned to my flagship and requested the deployment of the Void Breaker. Weapons, these were the planet sterilizers, the great weapons we had. Not used in 400 cycles, they were kept in deep storage on our home world. Only the Hegemony Council could approve their release. The Council debated for 6 weeks. Finally, they approved 3 warheads. I prepared to use them on the human colony world of Tarsus. Before I could give the order, a transmission arrived for me personally. It was from Admiral Linda Parker. She had aged in the 6 months of the war. There were lines around her eyes that had not been there before. She looked tired. She did not look defeated. Commander, she said, we know about the Void Breakers. We know you have 3 of them. We know which ship they are on. I froze. That information was classified at the highest level. Fewer than 20 officers in my entire fleet had access to it. She should not have known about it at all, let alone the specific ship. If you use them, she continued, we will respond. I want you to understand what that response will look like. I want you to understand, because I do not want to use it. I am telling you this, not as a threat, but as a warning. Between professionals. She paused. She looked directly at the camera. We have been holding back. You do not know this because we have been careful to make sure you do not know, but we have developed weapons during this war that we have not used. We have developed tactics we have not deployed. We have been fighting you with our left hand because we hoped you would see reason before we needed the right one. Her voice grew quiet. If you use the Void Breakers, we will use everything. We will not stop at your fleet. We will not stop at your colony worlds. We will not stop until the concordant hegemony is a memory. And I am telling you, Commander, we are capable of this. We have been capable of this for 3 months. We have simply chosen so far to leave you a path back to your home. I tried to reply. My voice did not work. At first, I had to try twice. You are bluffing. No, Commander, I am not. You are free to test me, but I would ask you to consider what you have seen in 6 months of fighting us. Consider whether we have ever once promised something we did not deliver. Consider whether we have ever once retreated from a threat we have made. She waited. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she said the words that would stay with me for the rest of my life. We are a species that learned a long time ago how easily we can destroy ourselves. We built weapons that could end our own world. We sat for a century with our hands on those weapons, staring at each other across borders, knowing that any mistake would mean the end of everything. We learned to be careful. We learned to hold back. We learned restraint as a survival skill. She leaned forward. But restraint is a choice, Commander. It is not a law of nature. We choose it. Because we do not wish to become what we are capable of becoming, you came to our world and tried to force that choice out of our hands. You keep trying. Every world you strike, every city you destroy, every threat you make pushes us closer to setting the choice aside. Please, she said, and her voice broke just slightly on the word. Please do not make us do it. Not because you fear us, because I do not want to become the person who has to give that order. I have a grandson. I would like him to grow up in a galaxy that still has your people in it. I would like that very much. The transmission ended. I sat on my bridge for a long time. Elise was watching me. She had heard every word. Commander, she said finally, the void breaker deployment. I thought about it. I thought about Admiral Parker's face. I thought about the civilian freighter pilots. I thought about Colonel Thesson shaking in his medical bed. I thought about the factories that had converted overnight. I thought about 14 million volunteers in a single day. I thought about a species that had lived for a century with its hand on a weapon that could end itself and had chosen every day not to use it. A species that had taught itself restraint on that scale was not a species that would collapse under pressure. It was a species that had already survived the greatest pressure of all, the pressure to destroy itself, and had won that fight through sheer collective will. I had been trying to break a species that could not be broken by external force because it had already faced the worst force imaginable, which was itself. Cancel the void breaker deployment, I said. Elise did not move for a moment. Sir, cancel it, return them to deep storage, and send a request to the Council for peace negotiations. Commander, the Council will not approve. They will remove you from command. Then they will remove me, but we are not going to use those weapons, Admiral. Parker was not bluffing. I know it. You know it. Everyone on this bridge knows it. I looked at her. We started a war with the wrong species, Elise. The kindest thing I can do for the hegemony now is to end it before we lose everything. She nodded slowly. She gave the orders. I did not know then that the Council would not agree. I did not know that they would strip me of command within a week. I did not know that they would give the void breakers to another commander, a younger officer named Threl Vakin, who had never met a human and believed every word of the original xenopsychology reports. I did not know that Threl Vakin fire all 3 void breakers at the human colony world of Tarsus within a month, and I did not know what the humans finally would do in response. I am no longer the one writing this record. Commander Vrenth has been confined to his quarters. The Council has replaced him with Commander Threl Vakin, and Threl Vakin has made the mistake that Vrenth tried to prevent. My name is Subcommander Elise Threnve, and I am recording this because I believe someone must remember what we did. The void breakers struck Tarsus at dawn. Local time, 14 million humans lived on that world. None of them survived. Weapons were designed to leave nothing. They did their job perfectly. Commander Threl broadcast the footage across every channel in the sector. He believed it would force the human surrender. He believed the sight of such overwhelming power would finally bring them to their knees. The humans did not respond for 48 hours. I spent those 48 hours in a state I can only describe as dread. Commander Vrenth from his quarters requested a private meeting with me. I went to him. He looked older than he had 6 months. Before, he had been a confident officer. When this war began, he was a frightened elder now. Elise, he said, whatever comes next, I want you to know that I am sorry. I should have been stronger. I should have disobeyed the council when they approved the void breakers. I should have done many things. Commander, I said, you did what you could. It will not matter what I did. It will only matter what Admiral Parker decides to do. He was correct. The human response came on the third day. It did not come in the form of a fleet. It did not come in the form of an attack. It came of all things in the form of a single small ship that appeared in orbit above the hegemony homeworld. The hegemony homeworld was in a different star system, 200 light cycles from the war zone. We had never in 3,000 years allowed any enemy ship within 1,000 light cycles of our capital. Our defense grid was the pride of our civilization. Nothing crossed it without being detected and destroyed. The human ship simply appeared. It did not cross the defense grid. It was already inside it. Our analysts later determined that the humans had built a new kind of drive, one we had never seen before, a device that folded space instead of crossing it. Where they had developed it, we did not know. How they had kept it secret, we did not know. What else they had developed that we did not know about was suddenly a terrifying question. The ship was small. It carried 3 people. One of them was a young woman named Emma Wilson, who we later learned had been a computer programmer. Before the war, she was the only human member of the crew with a visible role. The other 2 were from species the hegemony had conquered, a Krelt woman named Vessa Show and a member of the Orlan species named Kriv Aiden-Thal. I highlight this detail because it changes everything about what happened. Next, the human ship did not carry weapons. It carried a transmission device. The transmission began at noon local time on the hegemony homeworld. It broadcast on every public channel. It could not be blocked. Our technicians tried. They failed. The humans had built a signal that adapted to every countermeasure in real time. What the transmission broadcast was not a threat. It was not propaganda. It was not a demand for surrender. It was information. Specifically, it was every record the Hegemony Council had kept secret for the past 500 cycles, every private document, every classified order, every covered-up atrocity, every lie the ruling class had told to the ordinary citizens of the hegemony. It showed the truth about the Krelth conquest. It showed that the Krelth had not been a threat to us, that they had offered peace 3 times, and that the Council had attacked them because their world contained rare minerals. It showed the truth about the Orlan pacification. It showed that the Orlan rebellions had been staged by hegemony agents to justify continued occupation. It showed the truth about the taxes, the food distribution, the medical rationing. It showed that the Council lived in palaces while ordinary citizens were told that sacrifices were necessary for the empire. The broadcast lasted 6 hours. By the end of it, the streets of the hegemony capital were full of citizens, not soldiers, ordinary people, workers, teachers, parents, grandparents. They stood in the plazas outside the council buildings. They did not riot. They did not fight, they simply stood there. Millions of them waiting. The council attempted to respond. They called for the citizens to disperse. They promised investigations. They denied the accuracy of the broadcast. The citizens did not move. Within 3 days, the council was gone, not through violence, through refusal. The workers refused to work. The soldiers refused to fire on their own families. The bureaucrats refused to process orders. The machinery of the hegemony simply stopped because the people who ran it stopped running it. A new provisional government was formed. It declared a ceasefire with the humans. Immediately, it began peace negotiations. Within the week, I watched all of this from my flagship. I watched the empire my ancestors had built for 3,000 years come apart in less than a month, not because an enemy had defeated us in battle, but because 3 people in a small ship had told our citizens the truth. Commander Threlvakin was arrested by his own officers on the 12th day. I did not give the order, but I did not stop it either. He had fired the void breakers. He was responsible. He was taken into custody to be held for the war crimes tribunal that everyone now understood was coming. Commander Vrentz asked me to come to his quarters again on the 14th day. He looked out the viewport at the stars. "Do you understand now, Elise?" he said. "I think so, Commander. They did not attack our homeworld. They did not kill our council. They did not even fire a weapon. They just told our own people what we had been doing. And that was enough. Yes, Commander. We were never going to win this war. Not from the first day, because the humans were not trying to defeat our fleet. They were trying to defeat the idea of us. The fleet was just what we sent out to protect the idea. They knew that if they destroyed the idea, the fleet would stop on its own." He turned to me. "That is what Admiral Parker meant when she said she had been holding back. She could have sent that transmission on the first day she waited. She gave us 6 months to find peace. We refused, so she ended the war in 3 days the way she could have ended it on the first day. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. I want you to do something for me, Elise, he said. Anything, Commander. When the tribunal comes, I want to stand before it. I want to accept responsibility for my part in this. I could have stopped it. I did not stop it. I deserve whatever comes next. Do not try to protect me. Commander, your resistance to the void breakers could be used in your defense. It is not enough, Elise. I ordered the destruction of human cities in the first month. I ordered the strikes on their civilian areas. I ordered the assassination of their leaders. The void breakers were not the only crime. They were the last one in a long list. Do not protect me from that list. I nodded. I could not argue with him. We did not know yet what the humans would ask for in the peace negotiations. We did not know what kind of tribunal would be convened or who would sit in judgment or what punishments would be decided. We knew only that the war was ending and that the hegemony we had known for 3,000 years was not going to exist on the other side of it. On the 18th day, Admiral Linda Parker sent me a private transmission. I was alone when I received it. She looked tired. She did not look triumphant. She looked, if anything, sad. Subcommander Threnv, she said, I hope you will accept this message in the spirit in which it is offered. I know that you were present when Commander Vrent tried to stop the void breakers. I Know that you supported his decision. I wanted you to know that we are aware of this and that it will be remembered in the proceedings to come. She paused. I also wanted to tell you something personal. My grandson asked me last night what would happen to your people when the war ended. He is 7 years old. He has been afraid during this war the way children are afraid of large things. They do not understand. He asked me if we were going to do to you what you tried to do to us. Her eyes grew wet. I told him no. I told him that we were not going to do that because we are not like you, because if we did, we would become what we fought against, and I told him that the hardest part of winning a war is choosing not to become the thing that started it. She smiled a small, tired smile. He understood. I think children understand these things more easily than adults. I hope your people will understand too. I hope we can build something better together on the other side of this. The transmission ended. I sat alone in my quarters. I thought about the 14 million who had died on Tarsus. I thought about the cities my fleet had destroyed. I thought about the species we had conquered over 3,000 years, the Krelth and the Orlan, and so many others whose stories we had buried in classified files until the humans told them back to us. I thought about the fact that we had done all of this and the humans had chosen not to do it back. And I understood finally why Commander Vrent had tried so hard to stop the void breakers. He had not been afraid of losing the war. He had been afraid of what winning it would have meant. Because if we had used those weapons, and if somehow we had forced the humans to surrender, we would not have stopped. We would have done to them what we had done to the Krelthite and the Orlan. We would have buried their stories. We would have lived in our palaces on the mountains of their history. And the universe would have lost something it could not afford to lose. The humans were going to let us live. That was the gift they were giving us. Even now, in the final days of our defeat, I intended to deserve it. The war ended officially on the first day of the following cycle. The peace accords were signed in a neutral location, a small research station, open space, chosen because neither side had any claim on it. I was present as part of the hegemony delegation. Commander Vrent was not present. He had been taken into custody to face the tribunal the week before. I was there in his absence, representing the officers who had tried too late to stop what we had started. The humans who arrived for the signing were not what I had expected. I had prepared myself for cold faces and hard eyes. I had expected a delegation that would look at me with the hatred I deserved. Instead, the humans came with exhausted expressions, faces that had seen too much, eyes that wanted the whole thing to be over. They were not cruel. They were not triumphant. They looked more than anything like people who had just finished a very long and very difficult task. Admiral Linda Parker led the delegation. She was older than I had remembered. The 6 months of war had added years to her face. She shook my hand when we met, the human custom of greeting, and noticed that her grip was gentle. She did not try to assert dominance through it. Sub-Commander, she said, thank you for coming. Admiral, I said, thank you for inviting us. These were small words. They were not the words of great history, but they were, I think, the right words for the moment. We had run out of large speeches. We had done our speeches in the war. What remained now was the quiet work of figuring out how to live next to each other. The terms of the peace surprised everyone in my delegation. The humans did not demand our home world. They did not demand reparations. That would break our economy. They did not demand permanent occupation. What they demanded was accountability. The leaders of the hegemony who had ordered the original attack on Earth and who had ordered the Void Breaker strike on Tarsus were to be handed over for trial. The trials would be conducted jointly with judges from both human courts and hegemony courts, and with observers from every species the hegemony had previously conquered. The hegemony was to be dismantled as an empire. It would become a confederation of autonomous worlds. The conquered species would be given the choice to remain within the confederation or to leave it with full independence and their own territory returned. Reparations would be paid, but they would be paid in engineering assistance and educational exchanges rather than in material goods. The humans believed, and I came to agree with them, that the best form of compensation was the kind that built something new rather than draining what remained. And there would be no occupation force, no human soldiers on hegemony soil, no human administrators in our governments. We were being trusted to handle our own reconstruction. That, more than anything else, broke me. I had spent my entire career in an empire that could not imagine leaving a conquered people in charge of their own affairs. We had always believed that conquered worlds needed our guidance, our management, our permanent presence, to prevent them from falling back into chaos. It had seemed to us like common sense. It had seemed obvious. Humans did not believe this. The humans believed that the best way to create a stable peace was to trust the defeated party to govern themselves. They believed that occupation created resentment that lasted generations, and that resentment would eventually produce another war. They preferred to accept the risk of our failure over the certainty of our hatred. I asked Admiral Parker about this during a break in the negotiations. We were standing by a large window, looking out at the stars. "Why are you trusting us?" I said. "We started this war. We used weapons that destroyed a colony world. By every standard I understand, you should be treating us the way we would have treated you." She was quiet for a long time. "Sub-Commander," she said finally, "do you know what happened on Earth about 80 years before we met you? I know some of your history, not that period specifically. There was a great war, a global war. Two sides of our species fought each other with everything they had. The war ended when one side was defeated. The winners had to decide what to do with the losers." She paused. "They made a choice. They chose to rebuild the defeated nations rather than to break them further. They invested money, they shared resources, they helped the defeated countries become strong again, strong enough to be friends rather than conquered subjects. It was called the Reconstruction Plan, and it was the largest act of organized mercy in our history up to that point." She looked at me. "It worked. The defeated nations became our closest allies within 2 generations. Their children did not grow up hating us. They grew up building with us. The war did not repeat itself." "I see. We learned something important from that experience. We learned that the way you end a war determines whether you will fight it again. If you end it with Cruelty, you will fight it again. If you end it with generosity, you might not. Generosity is not a weakness. It is the most powerful weapon we have, and it only works after the guns have stopped. She smiled. So when we won this war, we had a choice. We could have been cruel. Many of my officers wanted to be cruel. I understood why. I felt it too sometimes. But I remembered what we had learned. I remembered the Reconstruction, and I chose to give you the same gift our ancestors gave their former enemies, not because you deserve it, because the galaxy deserves to have one less ancient grudge burning in it. I did not know what to say to her. She nodded as if she understood my silence and walked back to the negotiating table. I stood by the window for a long time. After she left, the trials began 2 months later. Commander Vrent was the first defendant. He refused a defense attorney. He stood before the joint tribunal and listed his own crimes in detail. He named the cities he had ordered destroyed. He named the officers who had carried out his orders. He named the number of civilians who had died in each strike. The humans on the tribunal were quiet during his testimony. They did not interrupt. They did not gloat. They simply listened. When he was finished, the chief human judge, a woman named Margaret Holt, asked him one question. Commander, in your own judgment, what is the appropriate sentence for what you have described? Commander Vrent thought about this for a long moment. Judge Holt, he said, I believe the appropriate sentence is to be removed from my society for the remainder of my life. I believe I should be placed in a position where I cannot harm anyone again, and where I cannot be honored for what I did. I do not ask for execution, because I do not believe that would teach anything to those who come after me. I ask for imprisonment, and for obscurity, let me be forgotten. Let those who would follow my path see that the reward for it is silence. The tribunal granted his request. He was sent to a research station on a distant moon, where he was assigned to work as a clerk in the historical records division. He would live there for the rest of his life. He would not be allowed to command. He would not be allowed to write memoirs. He would process the records of the war he had started day after day, and his name would slowly fade from the records he processed until only the deeds remained and the doer was forgotten. I visited him once 3 years later. He was thinner. He moved slowly. He was happy in a quiet way that I had not seen in him before. He had made friends with the other clerks. He had developed an interest in the history of hegemony, music. He had begun writing poetry that he would never publish. Illies, he said, when we sat together in the small cafeteria of the research station, you have become important. I have been following your career. Commander, you should not call me that anymore. Vrent then, and you should call me that too. I have not been a commander in a long time. Vrent, I have been appointed to the new Reconstruction Council. I am working on the integration of the Krelthi worlds back into their own governance. Good, that is good work. How is it going? Slowly. There is much to undo. The Krelthi have questions that we cannot always answer. The humans are assisting us, but they are careful not to lead. They say it is our responsibility to make things right. They are correct. We ate in silence for a while. Vrent, I said finally, Admiral Parker asked about you last month. She asked whether you were well. He smiled at the floor. That is kind of her. She said she hoped you had found peace. Tell her, he said, that I am working on it. Tell her that I do not believe I will fully find it in this life, but I am working on it, and that is the most any of us can do. I passed his message along. 30 years went by. 30 years is a short time in the life of a species, but it is enough time to see real change in a single life. I became an elder of the Reconstruction movement. I was involved in the drafting of the new Concord Confederation Charter, which replaced the old imperial structure. I helped negotiate the return of 11 formerly conquered worlds to their original governments. I assisted in the founding of the joint Xenopsychology Institute, the one that now teaches every young officer of every species the correct way to understand humans so that the mistakes of my generation would not be repeated. Admiral Parker retired from the human military about 10 cycles after the war. We stayed in contact. She became a teacher at a human academy training young officers in ethics and history. She said she wanted to make sure the next generation of human commanders understood what she had understood, so that humans would never again have to choose between restraint and survival. We met every year on the anniversary of the peace signing. We would find a quiet place somewhere neutral, and we would talk, not about strategy, not about war, about ordinary things. Her grandson had grown up and become an architect. Her great-grandchildren were beginning to be born. I told her about my own family, about the nieces and nephews who were growing up in a confederation rather than an empire, and who were learning human languages in their schools as a matter of basic education. We did not forgive each other exactly. We had not done that. The war had happened. The people who had died were still dead. You cannot forgive the past out of existence. But we understood each other, and that I came to believe was more important than forgiveness. Forgiveness can be granted quickly, even falsely, even as a lie told for convenience. Understanding takes time. Understanding is built slowly, conversation by conversation across years. Understanding does not forget the past. It carries the past forward correctly and uses it as the foundation of something better. In the final year of my professional career, I was asked to write the official textbook for the joint Xenopsychology Institute. The book was to be called Understanding Humanity, Former Enemy's Guide. I accepted the assignment. I wrote for 2 cycles. Book became the standard text on the subject, and it is still in use today. I want to end this record with the closing passage of that book. It is what I have come to believe after a lifetime of studying the species that taught me the most important lesson I ever learned. The passage reads as follows: humans are not the most powerful species in the known galaxy. They are not the oldest. They are not the most technologically advanced. They are not the largest in population, nor the most numerous in their colonies. What humans are is persistent. They are a species that learned to fight wars with themselves, and who paid the price for those lessons in blood for many centuries. They are a species that stood at the edge of their own destruction and learned to step back. They are a species that internalized the discipline of restraint, not because they are weak, but because they understand better than any species I have studied what it costs to be strong without limits. When they fight for reasons that run deeper than strategy. They Fight for memory, they fight for their dead. They fight for the idea that wrong should be answered, and they do not stop until the wrong is undone, because they have learned from their own history that unanswered wrongs do not fade, they only wait. But they have also learned that cruelty in victory is the seed of the next war. They have learned that generosity in victory is the foundation of peace. They practice both restraint and mercy, not as virtues but as tools for building the kind of future in which their grandchildren can grow up without knowing the weight of an old enemy's hatred. To those who would ever consider making war on humanity, I offer this warning, drawn from my own bitter experience. You will not frighten them. You may hurt them, but you will not frighten them. You will not outlast them. Whatever time scale you are thinking in, they are thinking in a longer one. You will not surprise them with your cruelty. They have been cruel to themselves at scales you cannot imagine, and they remember every lesson. You will not survive them if they decide you should not, but you can live alongside them. You can prosper with them. You can learn from them. They are, despite everything, among the most welcoming species in the known galaxy. Once you have convinced them that you are not a threat to those they protect, be kind to humans, be honest with them, keep your agreements, respect their dead, protect their young as they will protect yours. And if you are ever tempted to think of them as simple or soft or easily defeated, remember the hegemony. Remember that we were the greatest empire in the history of this arm of the galaxy. Remember that we fell not because the humans were stronger than us, but because we did not understand what we were fighting. We thought we were fighting a species. We were fighting a memory, a very long memory, a memory that did not forget. We survived because in the end they chose to let us. That choice was a gift. It is the most valuable gift I have ever received. It is the gift I have spent the rest of my life trying to deserve. I close this record and this career with a final thought. If you meet a human, meet them as an equal, not as a conqueror, not as a subject, as an equal. They will meet you the same way. And if both of you can hold to that, then perhaps the galaxy we build together will be the one that all of us have been waiting for across all the long dark ages of our separate histories without knowing we were waiting for it. My name is Elise Threnody. I was a sub-commander in a war that should never have been fought. I spent the rest of my life trying to make sure it would not be fought again. I hope I succeeded. I hope more than anything that you who read this, whoever you are, whatever species you are, will succeed where I could not fully succeed, that you will carry this lesson forward, that you will remember always that humans do not stop once the war begins, and so the only thing to do is to make sure the war never begins at all. Be careful, be kind, be at peace. End of record.